Hello, everyone. From my side, I want to welcome you to today's webinar, How Do You Create a Transformative Business Model? My name is Beth Jenkins. I'm Insights Director at Business Fights Poverty, the world's largest community of professionals working to harness the power of business to create social impact. And we're so happy to be co-hosting today's webinar with the Business Call to Action. BCtA, as many of you know, is a global corporate leadership platform with over 100 member companies now, all working to use the power of inclusive business to achieve the Millennium Development Goals. BCtA is a unique partnership between the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Swedish SIDA, DFID, USAID, UNDP, and the Global Compact, and we're so grateful for all of their support. Now, today we're really lucky to be able to speak with three people who have a rare combination of firsthand experience working to build transformative business models on the ground and a tremendous capacity for reflection. These three guys really do have that ability to take their experience and translate it into insights that are applicable to others like you and me. They are Paul Polak, founder and CEO of Windhorse International and International Development Enterprises. Paul is also the co-author with Mal Warwick of the book, The Business Solution to Poverty. We have Nitin Sharma, Senior Manager for South Asia, Corporate Strategy and Business Support at BASF India. And we have Erik, Simanis, Head of Emerging and Frontier Market Initiatives at Cornell University. I'll say a little bit more about each of our speakers as we dive into the session. We're going to start with brief presentations from each of them, and then I'll kick off the discussions with a few questions before opening it up to you, our audience, to really pick their brain. But I'd like to encourage you to start submitting questions as soon as one occurs to you, and you can do that by using the Q&A box in the lower right-hand section of your WebEx screen. So I'm going to ask Paul Polak to start. And I have to say, it's really hard to do Paul justice in a short introduction. He is a genuine pioneer in this space, having founded IDE more than 30 years ago now. And just for reference, that's about the same time that Mohammed Yunus was starting Grameen Bank. Since then, IDE has brought nearly 20 million people out of poverty by making radically affordable irrigation technology available to farmers through local small-scale entrepreneurs, and by helping farmers access markets for their crops. In 2009, Atlantic Monthly magazine ranked him right up there with the likes of Steve Jobs and Barack Obama as a brave thinker, that is, someone willing to risk their career, their reputation, and their fortune to no less than upend the established order. In 2013, The Economist named The Business Solution to Poverty one of its best business books of the year. And I'll just add that that book has a quote from Bill Clinton on the cover. Now, what's really amazing, as if that weren't enough, is that Paul is even more energized and ambitious than ever before, and now he's working on Windhorse International, a for-profit social venture with the mission of inspiring and also leading a revolution in the way companies design, price, market, and distribute products and services to benefit the 2.7 billion people who live on less than $2 a day. Paul, thank you so much for taking your time to be with us today, and I'll hand it over to you.
I'm delighted to be here, Beth. Thanks for having me on the panel. Let me just jump right in. From my perspective, the single biggest challenge that development faces today is the challenge of scale. And after 30 years trying to help improve the livelihoods of $1 a day and $2 a day customers, I'm convinced that market forces is the only effective path to scale. So what I'm working on now is to create a new model of frontier multinationals. Each of these multinationals, and I've started 3 of them, 2 in energy and 1 in drinking water, has the mission to, if successful, improve the livelihoods of at least 100 million $2 a day customers, generate 10 billion in annual revenue, and earn sufficient profit to attract international investors. in the book, The Business Solution to Poverty, we talk about this new model for scalable, profitable businesses that transform both the values of conventional international business and transform livelihoods. And the first requirement is to start fresh in designing both technology and business strategies and marketing and distribution strategies. We talk more in detail in the book about zero-based design, but basically it's based on the model of zero-based budgeting. That is, instead of tweaking budget categories every year, you start from scratch and say, how would I build a budget if I were starting today? That requires some of the things that are on the screen there. The first is to listen to customers. You can't design any business strategy without that. A necessary but not sufficient condition is a technology or service that is designed following the principles of the ruthless pursuit of affordability. Scale has to be built in from the beginning. Each product or service has to be have a potential for transforming the market, not just competing in a market niche. A critical issue is how to address last mile or last 500 feet distribution. Aspirational branding is a key part of it. Attracting private capital and the crazy kind of innovation that transposes designs that nobody would have thought of. That's called, many people call God innovation is a part of it. I won't go into detail, but it requires a different approach to design. I'll talk about two of the companies that are in different stages. Spring Health is an Indian company whose mission it is to sell safe drinking water at an attractive price to at least 100 million $2 a day customers, mostly in rural areas. We've been able to decrease the delivery price to approximately 7 cents a day for a family of 5 or 6, with delivering a 10-liter jerry can of water to their homes at that price and at scale, making money doing it. Spring Health is currently operating in 200 villages in Orissa in India and expanding currently at the rate of 25 new villages, about 25,000 customers a month. In the beginning of the year, we plan to expand that to 50 villages a month, roughly 50,000 new customers a month. Another company, Affordable Village Solar, again, each of these companies has branches in developing countries and is designed to operate in a large number of developing countries after the Tata model. Affordable Village Solar starts with the design of a photovoltaic solar pumping system capable of irrigating 1 hectare, and it has been successful in designing a solar pumping system that has cut the cost of conventional solar pumping by 80%. That's combined then with a variety of approaches to improve farm smallholder livelihoods. In summary, I think the biggest challenge is achieving scale. I think that the bar should be set at 100 million customers at a time for each social enterprise. And I think it eventually will require a transformation of conventional values and practice in large businesses, as well as transforming approaches to poverty.
Paul, thank you so much for those comments. I was hoping to follow up with one question at this point, just before we open it up at the end of everyone's talks. One thing I've heard you talk about in the past is a potential confusion between social mission and business methods. And I hear you talking about social enterprise but also 100 million customers, which is not a scale you typically associate with social enterprise. Is there a language issue here? You also use the term frontier multinationals. How do you think about combining social mission and business methods?
Well, the most effective tool for reaching scale is markets. Nobody knows more about earning a profit and reaching scale than multinationals. But multinationals conventionally, although this is changing, have felt that $2 a day customers, you can't make money serving them. That's now rapidly changing. I know that many people feel Mohammed Yunus is the leader of this group, and I have a great respect for him, but he feels that you can't combine, you can't have two masters in a company. Social mission should take the lead. If profit takes the lead, the social mission will not be realized. I don't agree with that. I think that if you start companies with only investments where the investors get their money back, that's in effect a 50% subsidy or something like that. I think to reach scale, you need to both make profit and reach social objectives. I don't see any contradiction between those two aims. Many large businesses have been exploitative, so I'm not saying that business is the answer to everything, but I think that if you harness the forces of the marketplace, you can do it in a way that reaches scale and addresses social values at the same time. So farmers, for instance, are quite willing to pay a fair market price to get access to water to irrigate their crops if they can make money. So I think that, for example, with the photovoltaic pumping system, farmers should be able to get a 2-year payback on their investment, which would be attractive to them. And I think that the company should be able to make money. If the company doesn't make money, then we're not going to be able to attract the kind of capital that allows us to expand. So I think there's often confusion about these two things. There's a great deal of attention paid to how to reach social objectives and how to measure them. But I found that the single biggest challenge is how to make money, because if you don't make money, you're not going to be able to expand. If you do make money, then you have to develop methods of batch expansion, but multinationals have been doing that for years. So I see no contradiction between making money and achieving a social impact, and I think that's the way to the future, but the values that have often been held by big business have to change.
Right, right. So the ability to make money is almost an indicator of value creation for the consumer, for the farmer. I think our next speaker would wholeheartedly agree with you there. Now let me just check. Yes, Nitin is having a little trouble with his connection, so we're going to move on to Erik Simanis now. And Erik, I have a feeling your mental wheels are already turning, having heard Paul speak. Just by way of introduction, it seems to me that when companies are ready to get serious about inclusive business, Erik is the guy that they call to help them figure out how to do it. He's got an MBA and a PhD, and he works for Cornell University, one of the prestigious Ivy League colleges in the United States. He's published in the Harvard Business Review and the Wall Street Journal more than once, and yet he couldn't be farther from the ivory tower. Erik's insight comes from 20 years working on the front lines with all kinds of companies, from startups to greenfield ventures to product teams from large multinationals, really helping them to create and shape new mass markets at the base of the pyramid. And often he's done this while living in the communities that they're trying to serve. Erik will be the first one to tell you that he's won some and lost some, and luckily for us, he's here to share with us the perspective he's developed all along the way. Erik, over to you.
Beth, thank you so much for such a kind introduction. And Paul, it was a pleasure to to be here with you on this call, as well as with Nitin. You're absolutely right. There's the words that Paul was saying at the end there absolutely resonate, and I think it's such a critical perspective that we really get people to embrace, that ultimately the best way to have social impact, path to social impact, is really through driving profitability. So I'm just going to jump right into things, and I'm going to take maybe just a little bit of a step back. And my focus, my work, as Beth just mentioned, is much more on the corporate side. So working within the context of a large corporation. And my sincere belief is that ultimately, if we want companies having significant, broad impact on the lives of the poor, that we have got to bring these projects into core business, into the P&L side of the company. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of wonderful sounding, very holistic, one-off projects that stay very small. And CSR projects are great and fantastic. We should expand them, but that is not how you harness the engine of the company. So ultimately, if we strip away all the buzzwords around this space, and I am fully culpable for adding to the buzzword stream that the bottom of the pyramid has attracted. But if we just get down to the brass tacks of what it means to approach bottom of the pyramid as a business opportunity with a company, it really means one thing, and that is it's about making investments that are going to create economic value that is equal to or greater than alternative uses of the very same capital. So it's at its very foundation, it's the opportunity cost challenge that you're working with here. And companies divide up value creation, then they divide up value creation very specifically across different business units, across levels in the company, and it's tightly specified for each one of those. So there are some who are responsible for 10% incremental growth of sales that calendar year. Some people are responsible for generating a 30% uptick in market share. Others are responsible for completely getting new categories and that next wave of growth. So in each one of these have very specific targets they're shooting for. And a lot of times I'll hear people saying, oh, we're going to create this BOP venture. Yes, it's going to create, we'll have increased revenues. We're going to create some brand value. But the thing is, you have got to speak very concretely if you're going to be working in core business. So I always use the example of the Super Bowl. If you tell me that the venture you're launching is going to create brand value, and I'm a brand manager, I know that $4.5 million at a Super Bowl ad is going to buy me 110 million viewers. So that's a cost of a little over 4 cents per viewer. So if you're going to say your BOP venture is more effective, you've got to be speaking that kind of a language. And if you're not talking at that level of language, like what is the cost, what is the benefit, how are you helping a manager achieve their targets, then you're just not in the game. And so if we really want to get serious and talk about these things as investment opportunities, we have to bound them right from the start and define what is the nature of the investment you're proposing. And in companies, it's really 3 factors that drive an investment's profile. How much money is it going to take on the front end? How long is the payback period that we're looking at? And then really, what are the capabilities it's going to have to draw on in the company? And in my experience, oops, let me move this forward. In my experience, there's really 2 factors that move the needle on those 3 elements. One, on the consumer side, one on the consumer side, it's really about how much consumer learning does your product require. And you can see this on a continuum from very low level of consumer learning, product like wheel detergent that was used as an example of a success case early on, where the product is already fully ingrained in consumers' lifestyles, it's part of their budgeting allocation. There might be some additional value you're adding in the functionality, but mostly that product is already fully ingrained in their lifestyle, up to something like water purification, which has been one of the areas that there's been a lot of focus, but it's been enormously hard to actually get consumers to adopt, simply because the very concept of clean water isn't something they thought about. There's a whole set of new routines that have to come into play and be learned. Simply budgeting money for it now is something that has to be done, and you're dealing with consumers, as we know, with very tight budgets, so it's going to have to reallocate that money from one consumption spend to something else. And on the other axis, we're looking at really the business side, and it's to what extent you can leverage and build off your existing value chain, or how much you're really going to have to fill gaps that show up in that value chain. And again, you're going to find out cases where you can essentially leverage your existing value chain completely. All the pieces of the puzzle are there, and it's merely a case of dropping that product into that channel, to situations where you're dealing with pure greenfields, where you probably don't have any distribution presence there. The retail channels that are available won't be affected in selling your product. You may even have to go back and look upstream and modify how you're doing manufacturing itself. And the point is that as you move up and to the right, this is what really starts to move the investment profile. It gets more expensive on the front end, a lot more investment. It takes longer to see that payback happen, and you're having to draw on a lot of parts of the company. I'm not going to run through this in any detail, but I just wanted to share this. This is a recent piece in HBR that came out, and basically I looked at that space and said, all right, you can find many different kinds of business development opportunities, different investment opportunities in the bottom of the pyramid. Bottom of the pyramid isn't always about requiring transformational change in a business model. Sometimes you can actually just tweak your business model and get there. For the most part, though, I would agree that if you really want to have significant growth opportunities, you're going to land up in the upper right-hand corner or moving up in that direction. But I just want to bring this out to everyone's attention just to share that there's different ways that companies can approach these, but you have to know before you jump into these markets what you're actually targeting, because it dictates how you have to structure and manage that project. In that space, you can pretty much break the investments into three main categories: mature markets, growth markets, and frontier markets. And really what these divisions I've made were based on where the resources and the timelines for managers, their responsibility shifts in level. So a mature market opportunity where you're looking at maybe 1 to 3 years maximum payback, less than $150,000 in investment, that's something that the general manager at the country level can manage. You look at a frontier market opportunity where you're looking at 7, 8, 10 years out, and you're looking at having several millions of dollars of investment. This is something that's going to require senior VP support, senior VP direction, and a very different project management and entire resourcing strategy. So I will stop with that and look forward to the conversation.
Eric, thank you so much. Can I ask you a question about your chart there, the second to the last one? I'm curious whether there's all species of companies that are involved in inclusive business, from the small startup that you might call a social enterprise up to the biggest multinational like the one we're about to hear from next. Is there a space on that map that you see different varieties of companies playing best, or do you believe that different varieties of companies could play successfully anywhere depending on the will?
Yeah, that's a great point. At the end of the day, I believe that that opportunity space can really be approached by anybody, whether it's the lone entrepreneur or if it's the multinational. In the multinational, a lot of people will say, oh, it's way too short-term focused, but that's not true. Yes, the managing director, the country level, yeah, they have to be able to demonstrate results that calendar year. So they're not going to be going after those longer-term opportunities. But there are teams, there are units within companies that are responsible for that investment horizon. So maybe the question for me would actually be, what is the challenge that you face really at the single entrepreneur level to tackle those long-term opportunities? There it gets a little bit more challenging, simply because you're having to demonstrate the opportunity constantly to investors. And whenever you're looking at opportunities that are 7, 10, 12 years out, typically those are extremely difficult to get funded because they don't have the concrete information. They don't have the data that can show that there is this opportunity there. Companies probably have greater ability to explore those.
Yeah. Eric, I'm curious what kinds of reactions you get, especially from large companies, when you show them your final slide with the 5 to 10 million in the upper left and your 7 or 8 to 10 years on the lower right. I can think of a few companies that have ended up being successful and have invested that much over that long time frame, but they didn't set out to do it that way. They expected the opportunity to be closer to the other corner. So how do you make that case, if you're showing them that up front, which is very transparent and honorable of you, how do you make the case for them to invest in that?
Well, and this is actually why I think it's fantastic we've got Nitin here, because I think Nitin's case demonstrates exactly how you go about doing that. You don't go after that far right corner right from the get-go. Most companies, you got to demonstrate that there is an opportunity. You got to go after the low-hanging fruit. You got to show to people that there actually is a viable business opportunity. It's the only way you actually get in the company the confidence and actually that freedom to then explore those longer-term. They're higher risk too. They're higher risk opportunities. So I actually think that is the key thing, and Nitin is wonderful in showing how you go about doing that and how you have a portfolio that then starts to generate enough revenues that you then get cut loose to go after that longer term stuff.
Right, right. Great. Well, thanks, Erik, and also for that segue to Nitin. Let me introduce Nitin to everybody. Nitin is, by training, a civil engineer and a marketer. He has spent many years in sales, channel management, and general administration in both the construction and chemicals sectors. Now, he was working in the strategy group at BASF India a few years ago when something possessed him to raise his hand and volunteer for an amazing new role, identifying and developing new business opportunities at the base of the pyramid for the company. Now, at the time, this was a move that probably could have been called high risk, high reward. High reward because BASF is the world's largest chemicals company with a huge product range, lots of potential to add value at the BOP, and capacity to deliver that at scale if they can figure out how to do it. And high risk because they didn't know how to do it yet, and luckily that's where Nitin came in. Under Nitin's leadership, the company has identified a number of promising opportunities, some of which are really showing great results. These range from crop protection all the way to affordable housing. And we're so glad to have you on the phone, Nitin. It must be very, very late your time, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth, for such a nice introduction. And I would like to thank Erik also for mentioning about what work BASF has been doing in the space of the pyramid space. Frankly, I'll just quickly straight away jump into what Erik was mentioning. What I frankly believe is philanthropy and corporate social responsibility are neither core to any corporate company nor they are sustainable enough to help the consumers at the base of the pyramid. So BASF, through this BOP project that we call the base of the pyramid, wanted to target the lower income segment in a much wider context, fitting the core business and simultaneously creating tangible benefits for both the company as well as the society, thus creating a win-win sort of a scenario. So the BOP initiative, if you see our definition itself, you see in slide, it's much wider than what Dr. C.K. Polak talks about in his famous book, Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. We also include the emerging middle class, and to the real destitutes of this world, we are focusing on projects which have some sort of external financing being involved. So either through a PPP partnership model or through a agency or a donor funding or some government agency funding, so that there's no direct selling is involved to the real destitutes. Now, the BOP initiative that we talk about is basically a business incubation project that enables a company like BASF, which predominantly operates in a B2B environment, to co-create with NGOs and national agencies so that it marries basically the MNC's resources, its technologies and best practices with those of the community. With this project, basically we are able to combine the economic success along with the social responsibility of the organization. Now, I would fully agree with what Erik was mentioning. Now, the team at BASF quickly recognized that we are way up the value chain to talk anything to this end market customers. To reach to the desired low-income consumer base basically involved the right channel partner, not only to reach to this customer base, but also to share high transactional costs across this value chain. For this, we basically require a deeper understanding and analysis across stakeholders across the value chain, trying to explore alternative channels to address this last mile challenge. Now, if you see across, we have identified various, if you look at what Erik was showing in his later presentation about that matrix, across these sectors, you can place most of these projects in different. So be it housing, we are talking of affordable housing for slum dwellers. So we have developed a technology, what you mentioned, that you need not come up with a new product. You can basically tweak your existing product portfolio to justify or to meet the unmet requirements of this customer base. You can increase the productivity within the value chain. So we have this agri-solutions Samruddhi model, which I will be talking about, which basically talks about prosperity for the farmers. And then we also have models of water purification or a bachat gut, which basically talks of a cluster development altogether. So you utilize, there's a benefit not only for a company like BASF, but there is benefits across the value chain. So you have benefits to a self-help group via which a company like BASF can enter into a salon market, which augments the source of income for the self-help group. It augments the local manufacturing, and it also helps the salon owner to get a quality product at a much lower cost, because you are eliminating the distribution, the advertising, and the packaging costs, which are the major costs if you talk about in the cosmetic industry. So if you talk about the Indian cosmetic industry, it's around 2.2 billion industry, which is highly fragmented, and players like even Unilevers and P&Gs of this world have not been able to cater to this properly. And via this kind of a model where you are involving a self-help group to address the last mile challenge, BASF is able to penetrate these markets. So there are several examples which I can talk about, but due to paucity of time, I'll just focus on this interesting model of Samruddhi. Basically, in India, India is the fifth largest producer of soybean in the world, but it nearly requires twice the area required to grow the same quantity of soybean. If we talk about the yields, when we were the yields in 2007 were 1/3 the global average. So our productivity was pathetic. There are umpteen number of reasons for that. It was inappropriate fertilization, excess seeding, inappropriate use of crop protection products, and even lack of knowledge about good farming practices. Now, BASF saw this as a need gap, an opportunity to develop this into a new model. Now, this Samruddhi model, basically what we call, addresses a need for the farmers in a very holistic way. We talk of enhancement of soybean productivity. So, company like BASF, which is just predominantly into crop protection, move to, if you see this next slide, it moves from just crop protection to the overall value chain. So you have, starting from the agronomical practices, please, if you can just go back a slide. Starting from the agronomical practices to, I should say, arranging the mandi prices for the farmers. We have educated the farmers not only on agronomical practices, on fertilization, on weed control, and harvesting practices, and then now we are even moving towards post-harvest solutions. So though BASF is just a crop protection company, we are touching the farmer on several levels. Now, what this has done, when we started this initiative in 2007, we just had 30,000 farmers in whole of the country. Within a span of 5-6 years, we have already have close to now over 200,000 farmers in this program. If you move on to the next slide, I'll just like to show what is the kind of impact that this has brought in. The impact that it has brought in is that we now, it has resulted in 25% increase over the non-program farmers. It has brought a 36% net profit increase for the farmers, and it has, if you see the overall cost of cultivation hasn't increased that much. So that's the value that BASF has brought in. We are not a fertilizer company, but we have been recommending what type of fertilizers, what kind of seeds. So those touch points have increased. We have been training the farmers, demonstrating the farmers across the value chain the benefits. frankly, we even run a call center for the farmers trying to address the problems. We have, we call these our trainers margdarshak. We have appointed various opinion leaders from the community, trained them on farming practices, just to not only educate them, but also educate them to a level that they can educate the community itself. Moving on to the next slide, basically, this talks about how we have made the farmer prosperous, because the whole program is focusing on prosperity of the farmer. Once the farmer is prosperous, the company would benefit. So if you see what kind of additional income, how they are using is, they're decreasing their agricultural loan, they're decreasing their personal loan, they're increasing savings through agri practices, they're going for better seeds, their investment in tractors, etc. have increased. So those are the kind of benefits that BASF has, this program has provided to the farmers. So in real terms, what we have done, if you move to the next slide, it clearly shows that the average increase in yield has been 20%, and the income of farmers has grown by nearly 39%. So that's the real difference that we have made in the life of the farmers. This program basically has already been recognized by the Indian government, and last year we also got featured in Responsible Corporate Engagement in Rural India by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. There are several such examples. Because of paucity of time, I've just mentioned one of them. We have been working on slum rehabilitation, developed a technology which is used for a high-rise building, tweaked it, had done these discussions across the value chain, tried to identify the problem, or I should say the gaps within the this value chain, and then came up with a solution which was addressing the problems across the value chain by just tweaking our existing product portfolio. So if you see what Erik was mentioning, if we are able to incorporate these, I should say, business models in sync with the core business, then definitely we will be able to have much faster results. The challenges in these such large organizations basically happens or comes out is that most of the organizations are not in tune with BOP business models, frankly. Large establishments like BASF often come up with a lot of baggage, legacy systems, processes. And BOP initiative is a resource-intensive model and requires long-term commitment from the management. So there has to be a buy-in across the organization. A change in mindset is required to reconceive the markets to suit the BOP population. There has to be a readiness in the country management to accept even low success probabilities initially to support the program. The second thing is when you are talking of is scalability and penetration in the market. This basically comes by establishing trust and developing networks. At times, either developing your own network, which might take a bit longer, or coming up with innovative networks like what we talk about in this BCtA model of a self-help, utilizing self-help group to penetrate the salon markets. So I should say over this span of 4 years, we have been able to generate around 15 million euros this year we will be closing, and the target for us is around 100 million euros in the next 5 years through all these BOP initiatives.
Nitin, that's so interesting. Thank you so much. Now, the question that's at the top of my mind, I'm just going to ask you because I see participants are starting to type their questions into the box, and there's already 2 questions about, surprise, surprise, raising money. So first of all, let me remind the participants, please do submit your questions anytime they occur to you. We're going to start moving into the Q&A now. You can do that in the box in the lower right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. And let me turn back to Nitin now. So Nitin, can you explain either or both for the Samruddhi initiative and for the affordable mass housing initiative you mentioned where you developed an additive to improve the concrete. Can you tell us a little bit about how you raised the money for that Did you raise the money internally or externally? Were you able to get it all in one tranche, or do you have to go back every year? Anything you can share would be great, any practical tips.
Frankly, as I was mentioning, there was if you talk about both these programs, there was a lot of change in the business model itself, the thinking of the organization towards BOP itself. What I was mentioning was that this kind of an initiative is a bit resource intensive. Either you develop a totally new solution or a new channel. So what we did was we then went ahead on a whole countrywide basis. We started with a bit small, started with pilots. So when we talk about slum rehabilitation, we wanted to prove the concept first. We started with Karnataka Slum Clearance Board project in Bangalore. We were trying to rehabilitate 6,000 families. So there we established the concept. We proved it to the government agency out there that had detailed discussions across this value chain, understood what their pain points were, and then internally discussed what BASF could do, and came up with this solution, which basically was the product which was used for high-rise building like Burj Khalifa, the same product which was tweaked a bit and was able to cater to the requirements of the customer. Now, in this case, the funding for the testing and trials was from BASF itself, because it was a small pilot that initially we started. But then this success was replicated to other cities. The second project that we got was for Delhi Development Authority in Delhi for 40,000 houses. Now, in that case, it was the organization DDA who paid us for the trials, for conducting trials, for establishing the product at their site, because they already knew that we already have a success built in with these 6,000 houses with another government agency. And once we were able to click Karnataka Slum Clearance Board, we had the credentials to prove that this concept would work. To tell you frankly, our construction chemical team themselves were not very sure that we would be able to crack this market, because the sales team themselves were thinking that this is a red ocean. This a mindset change even was required for even them to look at this market as an opportunity, because in India, if you talk about mass housing, slum rehabilitation, and if you talk to a construction chemical company like BASF, that's one of the divisions that BASF has, that's not their cup of tea. But with this value chain integrated approach that we had, starting from, I should say, the ready-mix concrete manufacturer to the slum dweller, where we were addressing more or less pain points of everyone, we were able to have a paradigm shift. We moved the market from a low technology market to a high technology market by using our products.
Thanks, Nitin.
To talk about Samruddhi now, Samruddhi basically again started in just 2 districts in the state of Maharashtra. So again, the trials were done. Once you were able to prove that, then the market also pays for it. Once you are able to develop trust within the farmer community, then they are ready to part money with you. So initially, the investment definitely was coming from BASF. We had arranged for payback periods for various projects, but we have been pretty successful and lucky to achieve break-even pretty fast, frankly. Our models have clicked.
Right, right. Well, Paul and Erik, I know you also have experience trying to raise money, whether internally or externally, for ventures like this. And I'm wondering, in your experience, is there anything different about the process for someone who's focusing on the BOP market as opposed to more traditional markets? For example, what about access to impact investment? How does that help, or does it help? Are there any drawbacks to that? Maybe we can first start with Erik and then go to Paul.
Can you hear me, Beth?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Well, this is where I think there's a bit of a shift we need to start making. I think the challenge starts when we start defining the business objective, first and foremost with the social objective. And what I mean by that is, if we really, again, want to drive this into core business, these are investment opportunities. Yes, there's the externality that we get from these is that we bring valued and needed functionality to consumers, but first and foremost, you're selling an investment opportunity. And I think that if you start approaching it this way, that you face just exactly the same challenges you would with any other investment, whether you're targeting middle or upper class with it. So I think the challenge actually happens when companies start to look to try to get funding, grant funding, or kind of leverage funding from outside donors, multilaterals, is that suddenly they start to shift out of a real business rigor and thinking to trying to focus on the social impact. And at some point, a lot of times I'll see it becomes the tail starts to wag the dog, and the venture is now being driven by kind of the social mission first and foremost, and not by rigorous business principles. So in some ways, I think one of the dangers about the social investment focusing on that is that you can actually have business drift, and in the end, a business that isn't profitable, it will die. And at the end, you're not going to have any social impact. So I'm not sure if that answers your question directly, other than I actually feel like, both sides have to be a little bit more accepting that if you want to harness and drive this into core business, that it's not going to look like a development project that you simply try to get some revenues and make it, quote, sustainable that way. It's business investment first and foremost, and the trade-offs that you're going to make, which every business runs into for how you allocate resources, has to always be allocated towards securing the business's success. That's how you secure social impact success, is through securing business success first and foremost.
Thanks, Erik. Paul, do you have anything to add to that before I move on to another cluster of questions?
Very much so. I think that the question about how to raise money illustrates, the answer to that question illustrates the confusion in the whole field of social business. So the difficulty in raising money depends on what you're raising money for. Are you raising money for a business? Are you raising money for a social mission? Let's be very specific. I can't tell from what Nitin has presented whether Samrudin is a business or a very valuable social initiative. So I would ask Nitin, is Samrudin, how much money does Samrudin make? Is it designed to make a profit, or is it designed to improve the lives of farmers? It certainly has succeeded in improving the lives of farmers. I have found it much easier to raise money for a nonprofit mission. IDE raised a lot of money for the popularization of treadle pumps, which eventually helped some 20 million people, small farmers, move out of poverty, but it was not a business. And then if you are raising money for a business, the question is what kind of a business? Erik's focus is on influencing existing corporations to enter bottom of the pyramid markets and I think to make a profit. I would very much agree with that. But there are different ways of doing that, as he points out. I believe that the most effective way is to create new markets and to go into the high-risk arena. As I look at history, Henry Ford was not influencing an existing corporation. He started a new one that transformed the market. The same with Jobs and Wozniak. So there are many choices, and the more you go towards creating a pure for-profit business and moving it to the higher risk transformative business, where the biggest opportunity is, the more difficult it is to raise money. I myself have found that to be the biggest challenge, but I'm trying to create new frontier multinationals. I think it's now relatively much easier to attract funding for more mainstream activities that are not exactly for-profit businesses. I hope I haven't confused the issue more, but I think that one of the most difficult things is for social entrepreneurs starting new businesses to raise money. There's more and more money available, but less and less money in the high-risk end that has the true opportunity to transform the lives of poor people and transform markets.
Thanks, Paul.
Beth, could I just make one?
Yeah, please.
Could I just make one quick comment, because I just about what Paul said, because I think he's absolutely dead on about where there's the absence of money, looking for those longer term. But I think one of the reasons also why there's an absence of it is that the business rigor for a lot of those ventures that are targeting those, my experience has been it's been very low. And what I mean by that, there's a lot of aspirational kind of languaging about, what's the opportunity, but there's been an absence of rigor to it. And by that I mean you still got to have numbers behind it. You still got to justify what you're doing. You got to have a very clear approach for how you're going to stage gate this thing. And my sense is, particularly in the social entrepreneur space, that there's a laxity in terms of how we approach this. And we think, well, these are longer term, so we can be organic about things. And I feel like there's actually like a deal flow problem that happens to the social impact space, because if you want to fund that area, you still can't find one. You can't find the opportunities that really are being driven in a rigorous business fashion. So I think it's actually on both sides of the coin that the problem sometimes happens.
Thanks, Erik. We've had a cluster of questions that get to the matter of partnership. And I wondered if, Erik, you could potentially comment on the role that partners can play in starting and scaling these inclusive or transformative business models successfully. And one participant specifically asks, given that you're trying to harness the core business, how do you actually ascertain with a development partner that you share both a social mission, but you still are harnessing the core business?
I've got a piece in The Guardian that talked a little bit about this issue of public-private partnerships. I mean, ultimately, again, if we look at this as a business question, you start a partnership when it fills a business need, not just because you want to start a partnership. It has to have a very clear role that it's playing, whether it's the partner you're looking at is going to lower the cost of providing some part of that value chain to get the product or service, whether they're being able to reach that consumer in a way that you can't do in the short run, whether it lowers your risk profile. But first and foremost, my always counsel is you start these things alone. Go it alone, understand what the challenge is, understand where you need a partner to fill in. You don't start off looking at these ventures by first forming a partnership and then saying, what can we do? I feel like that's kind of a recipe for a very long, drawn-out process where you're going to have difficulty moving forward. So in the sense of all these ventures, I think that where we've seen successful partnerships, they're very transactional. You look at a case where, the name escapes me, which is the micro insurance company, where the insurance company was able to basically package up and develop a new insurance product for the clients of a microfinance provider. But in that case, it's simply selling a product into kind of a channel. But looking kind of more in a very kind of general way, like how can we kind of co-create a model? That's not how successful partnerships operate in business. So I think that's the key thing. Go it alone, figure out what is the key, if you need to find a partner, because you can always build those capabilities yourself. The question is, are you doing it because you want to pilot test something, you don't want to spend the time and the money to develop a capability if there's high risk in the project? So be really clear on what's the business function that partnership plays before you jump into one.
Can I just add to that? I think that there are many different types of partnerships, but to make an impact on $2 a day people, they are mostly located in rural areas in small villages. So I think the business of the future will have partnership with thousands of village enterprises. For instance, for drinking water, we're partnering with Kirana shops. In each village, we're partnering with women self-help groups. Those kinds of partnerships will be a critical dimension of the radically decentralized large business, multinational business of the future.
Paul, thanks. Oh, sorry, Erik, were you going to add?
Yeah, no, but even how Paul, you're presenting that, I feel like I completely agree with you. There's a role that they can play, but in those cases, you've identified a very specific role. And I think maybe the term partnership, just is so broad that we kind of lose sight of what it is. But yeah, absolutely. There might be times that you can partner with self-help groups to bring a product to market. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes the product you're selling is going to be not effectively sold to self-help groups. It's just a case-by-case situation.
Both of your responses are providing a nice segue to the next cluster of questions, which is around distribution. This is such a common challenge that people struggle with and ask about. So I'm wondering, it can be hard to get too specific without drilling down into a particular industry or even product. But I wonder if there are any general principles or key success factors that you can share about how to distribute into these communities. Nitin, would you like to start, maybe explain how do you distribute to your products to small farmers?
Again, it depends upon the kind of market which you rightly mentioned. So if you mention about Samruddhi, we have a network of 4,000 distributors across pan-India now. We have a workforce of around 2,000 people who we have employed via a third party to be part of this program, which are from the community who have been trained by BASF. So we have tried to set up our own network, but this is this development of a network comes at a cost, and then this takes time. So for us to develop this kind of a network took nearly 4.5 years. And the management was ready to accept, I should say, longer payback period for this kind of a project. But then there are certain others. I completely agree with Paul was mentioning about use of self-help groups. So I was mentioning about this buttered gut model that we have. So to target the salon market in India, which is a $2.2 billion USD market, which is growing 35% year on year, which is even faster than the cosmetics industry, even in a country like India. But the challenge is that 80% of this market is highly, I should say, unorganized and fragmented. So you can't have your own channel. Developing a channel again will require for us to invest another 4 years. So what we have done is we have targeted these self-help groups who have, I should say, trust within the community, have the penetration in the community, so that they can reach to these salon owners in peri-urban and rural areas in India. The salon owners basically are women, and it's sort of a side income which gets generated via these women for the household. So the self-help group is a perfect channel to distribute the products. So what we do is we involve, because we are just an ingredient manufacturing company, we involve local manufacturers. We act as a technology partner for the local manufacturers who distribute the products via the self-help group. So the self-help groups augments their revenue stream by having this product. The local manufacturer basically gets more customers, and the salon owner gets benefit in the sense that he gets a quality product which is being designed by BASF at a much lower cost, because the advertising, the distribution, and the packaging cost, which nearly forms 40% of the cost in the cosmetics market, is passed on even to the salon owner. So there is the benefit across the value chain. Now, what I would agree with
Nitin, can I
Erik,
interrupt you just a second? Because I want to ask a tag-on question to this, having to do with distribution. One of our participants, Lee Babcock, wonders, you've got these channel partners, but is access to secure payment mechanisms a big barrier to large-scale distribution at the BOP? And could the increasing prevalence of mobile money be a key enabler?
Frankly, initially we were having issues with small farmers and small landowners. But what we have done is with employing the people from the community and making them responsible for these kind of collections. As I told you, now we've employed more than 2,000 people who are part of the community, who are responsible for not even educating the farmer, but also recovering the money. I think we don't have, our dropout rates would be hardly 2 to 3%, not more than that.
Okay, so you use a different mechanism. Paul,
can I comment on the collections? I think in a radically decentralized system, collections are a huge problem. I think the future collection solution is through mobile phone systems. That's not, in our experience, quite ready yet. There's another major influence, especially in India, under the new government. The rules are very much simplified for establishing a bank account. The difficulty we've had is that when you have 1,000 people collecting money and they're collecting cash and they keep it in their pockets, there's a real collections problem. So what we're launching now is an initiative to have each of the people that are radically decentralized that are collecting money establish a bank account. That simplifies things quite a bit. And now I just want to point out, I agree very much with Nitin, there are 2 or 3 self-help groups in just about every village in Orissa. And in India, there are already 10 million Kirana shops. All of those are potential partners, but the mechanism of, for things like collections are some of the big challenges that face us. I think they're solvable.
Paul,
yeah, I'd just like to, if I can just add to this, I totally agree with Paul. That was the reason I was mentioning different industries, different, like for Samruddhi, this was the model, but for self-help group, we have these bank accounts and we have all the payments coming via RTGS and NEFT transfers. So we are dependent on mobile money, payments via net when we are dealing with the self-help groups. The Samruddhi model is a bit different because it's a more resource-intensive model which BASF has employed. That was the reason I was mentioning different horses for different courses. So,
if I could add to
Erik, could I, just because we're with our 10 minutes left to go here in our session, and I do want to get to a very interesting question we received from Sandeep. And that question is for Paul. Can you provide a concrete example of how you combine things that might seem at odds? One is ruthless affordability and the other is aspirational branding. How do you, give us an example of how you do both?
Well, best example would be Spring Health, a water company. There are many different types of ways of purifying water. We have chosen making chlorine out of ordinary salt by running electricity through it. So we have a radically affordable way of purifying drinking water. We can purify 80,000 liters a day using liters of water a day using a device with a capital cost of $250 and operating cost of about $1.10 a day in US dollars. So we've got a very radically affordable technology for purifying water. It's much more affordable than reverse osmosis. Now, how do you combine that with aspirational branding? Well, aspirational branding is even more important for bottom of the pyramid markets than for middle class or wealthy markets. So we can produce 80,000 liters of water, but water is heavy, so you can't deliver it because it costs too much. So we partner with Kirana shopkeepers in every village, and then they in turn hire a rickshaw driver to deliver 10-liter jerry cans to people's homes. There is signage at each shop, and the essence of our activity is to develop a reliable integrity brand, which is Spring Health, so that the delivery boys have signage. When we use auto rickshaws, that has higher status. People don't necessarily buy safe water because it's safe. They buy it because it's like Coca-Cola. So everything that we say and do is part of us establishing an aspirational brand. We test water samples that people bring us for E. coli, and we tell them the truth. If the piped water supply in the village is delivering safe water, we tell them that it's safe. They don't need to buy our water. If, on the other hand, it's not safe, we tell them it's not safe. So everything that our staff do and say, as well as signage, as well as the uniforms they wear, as well as the signage when we do a village theater, all of that is part of aspirational branding, but our product is a radically affordable product.
Erik, it reminds me of what you often talk about consumer learning, and how do you actually get consumers to change long-standing routines? Do you have any tips and tricks?
Yeah, because I actually think this is there's some confusion that happens. You can design a product, so the product cost can be very low, but what ends up usually, particularly these very new products, totally raises your cost structure is the marketing. In most companies, the approach, which makes sense in markets where you already have the product category established, it's the marketing mix. You run activations, you get the message out, you build awareness. The problem is when you're going to market with very new functionalities, be it fortified food, water really struggled with this initially. The cost of trying to drive that demand up, you just cannot recoup that bottom line cost through the margins that you're getting on your product. So the only way that I've seen that, or what I believe is critical to making these things successful, is you've got to build consumer learning and behavior change strategies into your model. If you're relying on marketing, and whether it's social marketing on the back end, you won't recoup it. And so, I mean, from a pricing standpoint, for example, one of the things to drive consumer adoption, because a lot of times any new product is just it feels uncomfortable the first time you use it. First time you purify water, it doesn't feel comfortable. First time you're trying to go and bring this whole new kind of a routine using it, it doesn't feel right. So getting consumers to using a pricing structure that forces the consumer to go through multiple trials is one way to just build that comfort and habituation. And so one of the things we do is price not on like one-offs, but price for like a subscription rate. That way you ensure that the consumer does 7, 8 trials of a product. Similarly, in terms of the product side, the product will bundle a very new functionality with functionalities that are already very well established. So you're basically hiding the new functionality and stuff that they already value. Using things like loyalty awards programs, where again you're able to surround this new functionality which creates a lot of consumer kind of uncertainty and doubt. Use loyalty awards program where you present to consumers very aspirational products. So in Ghana, for example, we were using machetes and metal dish basins. And so by having those, consumers actually are really wanting that, and we'll get a consumer to stay on for 3 months because they're subscribing every month. So by having those pieces together, you're reducing consumer uncertainty, you're building a lot of the kind of consumer routine habituation. We'll do things like we'll actually sell to a group of 2 or 3 people rather than individuals, and very, very actively leverage the peer effect that comes with that. So there's a lot of ways. I've got a market creation mix that I've been developing that looks at how you look at the 4 Ps very differently when you're trying to embed consumer learning and behavior change into your model. Okay, final comment. When you do that, the consumer pays for their own behavior change.
So this relates to the next question I want to. Yeah, please, Nitin, go
Beth,
ahead.
I just wanted to add on to what Erik was mentioning. Like, I believe that establishing trust within this BOP markets also goes a long way in, I should say, developing the customer base as well as capturing more markets. Like BASF has benefited by establishing trust with their partners through a very supportive and open approach. Like if I take the case of Samruddhi, BASF benefited by establishing trust with the farmers, as our advice is never restricted to a product portfolio, but includes other products which BASF considers the best and which would help the farmer increase their yield. So over this time has helped BASF gain trust, respect of the farmer community, and this has resulted in mutual gains for both the farmer community and for BASF.
Great. Now, I think the discussion relates to the next question I want to submit to you all from Bandanjot Singh. And he asks, is there a better product model, on the one hand, to make products affordable to customers for upfront purchase, or make them more reliable but expensive and let customers pay as they go until the cost is covered. Any thoughts on that? This could be for any of the panelists.
Well, I had some experience with this, and I think that the key variable is not the two that you've mentioned, but communicating with customers at every step in the process, so that you have to learn from the customer. I think radical affordability is critical, but for instance, with drinking water, we assumed in our first 20 villages that people would be motivated to go to the shop with their jerry can and buy water at a 25% lower rate than to have it delivered. But what we learned is 85% preferred to pay 25% more to have it delivered. So we had to change our whole model, and we actually increased the price, and we set it from 3 rupees to 4 rupees for everybody. So what customers want is very different. That's why it's rarely possible to produce cosmetic changes in an existing high-end product. The actual requirements at the bottom of the pyramid are quite different, so you have to design the product to fit the requirements of the customer. Labor rates in rural Orissa are something like $2 a day. That's very different from somewhere else. So what customers for agricultural products are willing to pay for is very different than the product qualities in an affluent and more affluent market.
I guess the piece to speak directly to that, to the question about the trade-off of those. Again, it's one of these things that I say depends on what is the price point we're looking at. I think and the nature of the functionality. Again, it gets back to like the more unique, the newer that the functionality is to the consumer, the more resistance you're going to have to purchasing. And particularly when you start going up into the challenge you have with a lot of durables, it's just that consumer uncertainty when you're having to pay $10, $15, $20 for a durable, it can be prohibitive. It's difficult with a one-time purchase to get someone to move beyond that uncertainty and the risk that they feel. So I actually think that products that are more structured as consumables are actually more easier to get consumers to build those routines. And I think this is what I think is really interesting learning that if you look at M-Copa, the kind of the spinoff from M-Pesa, or at least using that same model to sell electricity, that they've essentially taken what was a durable and have shifted into a consumable, where the consumer gets the lantern and they're using a recharge card to buy the additional power. But it's a bit of a razor and blade model. But anytime you can take a product and turn it into a consumable where you move away from kind of the one-time pay, I think that's a definitely preferable structure for these markets.
But poor people, let's take an example. In the West, we expect product to last a certain time. We found that with treadle pumps, farmers preferred a cheaper 2-year product to a 5-year or a 7-year, simply because the return was so high. For drip irrigation systems, their durability depends on the wall thickness. When people were growing vegetables, they changed the configuration of their plots every 2 years, so they preferred a 2-year product, which was cheaper. When they were growing fruit trees, they preferred a 5 to 7-year product. So the really attractive products, in my experience, for $2 a day customers are income generating, not consumables, although they certainly are in the market for consumables. But the most important product, in my experience, the types of products are products that can help generate income. And once you develop product loyalty or brand loyalty, then when they move into more the middle class, they become loyal customers for your brand.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree at all. I mean, I feel like product by product issue. Whether I agree that great if you can increase income, but the fact is there's just only so many opportunities for businesses to do that, and most companies are selling products. So yeah, I totally take your point. It's just that if you're from a company perspective and you sell shampoo, you're going to sell shampoo, and it's about figuring out how to bring that value and that functionality to consumers at a price point and in a manner that they can afford, but that still creates profit for the company.
I think you've both highlighted some key principles that really speak to a question we received from Thomas Galloway, who pointed out that there have been some really great products that have even won awards, but then totally failed to take off in BOP markets. And he wondered what kinds of products have the highest growth potential. And the two of you seem to be saying products that can be made consumable and products that have the effect of increasing the incomes. Or maybe we can also talk about cost savings of the consumers. I'd like to encourage everybody to, if you've got any final questions, we're just going to take an additional 5 minutes. I could probably take one question, but I did have one come in that gets to the replicability and applicability of this whole concept of transformative business models. Katrin Froelich asks whether you think these businesses have potential in post-conflict areas, or are they already challenging enough in areas that are more stable? Anyone have a perspective on that?
Yes, I have some experience in selling products in post-conflict areas. It depends on how much chaos there is. But we were working in post-conflict Cambodia. We worked in the refugee camps in Somalia. It's a question of finding the right products. In the refugee camps in Somalia, a $450 donkey cart produced a net return of $200 a month. It was very attractive. In post-conflict Cambodia, treadle pumps that could show a 200% net return on an investment cost of about $25 were attractive in some places, but it had to be the right places. So I think it's possible to do business things. That is, the donkey carts we sold, and we trained refugee blacksmiths to make them. And there was a very high demand because of the profitability. There are some areas that I think it's quite challenging that I'd be reluctant to try to operate businesses in, but in many areas there's a real opportunity, I think.
And I think it gets back to echo what Paul's saying. I mean, almost by definition, a lot of these areas you're going to face situations where you don't have a distribution channel, you don't have that downstream piece, so you're automatically looking at opportunities that are going to require significant investment. And so anything, again, that has significant investment in it, you've got to have a certain level of stability associated with that. Whether, and again, it's going to be a case-by-case basis, whether in a certain post-conflict community. I mean, look at Rwanda now. Rwanda now is certainly attracting a considerable amount of investment because post-conflict, but there's a stability there that ensures that when you move in there that you can make these longer-term investments. So for me, that's probably the key trade-off. If there's a product that's off the shelf that and you have some kind of a distribution channel that's nearby that you can quickly tap into, then it would work. But again, if you're looking at longer-term stuff, that's probably less likely in a recently post-conflict community.
Great, thanks everyone. So we've run 5 minutes over time, but I think it's been an incredibly valuable session. We talk about transformative business models. What does that really mean? And I think our panelists have conveyed some sense of, it's the opportunity to develop products and services and distribute them to consumers at very low levels of income and access to goods and services and livelihoods at scale. And they've made, all three have made a very clear point that the only way to do that is through core business. There are other needs that can be met through philanthropy and CSR. And if we had another hour, we could talk about the interplay between those things. But it's been quite a session, and I want to say thank you to, first and foremost, to our three speakers, Paul, Erik, and Nitin. I want to say thank you to our co-hosts and sponsors at the Business Call to Action, And I want to say thank you to all of our participants. I think at our peak we had well over 100 participants today. So thank you so much to everyone for attending, and we look forward to the next opportunity.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. This does conclude our webinar. You are now free to disconnect. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great rest of your day or night, depending on where you are. Thanks again.